Hi, my name is Paulina Bodner Shapiro. I'm a book of the Simsbury Human Library, and my book is titled Soviet Jewish Immigrant. I came to this country in 1993 when I was 15 and a half years old. I immigrated here from the former Soviet Union with my family, with my parents and my little sister and my grandparents. And I've lived here for almost 32 years now, so I consider US my home. And I've lived in Simsbury for the last 15 years. Prior to that, I lived in Massachusetts. Well, I was a teenager, so things were tumultuous for me already due to hormones and whatnot. So of course it was a huge stress for me. I was very worried. I'm sure it was a bigger stress for my parents who were leaving their life behind in search for something new and they didn't even know what to expect, I'm sure. For me, it was dramatic. It was a bit tragic because I had to leave my home as I knew it, all the familiar things. I was really worried about never seeing my friends again, and just worried about the future. So it's being a teenager was already difficult and complicated in its own way, and when you throw immigrating to another country, in a country that is so different from the place where I was born and raised, yes, it was a little bit scary, to say the least. Yes, because I was already a teenager, 15 years old. They were very frank with me about things. The opportunity to immigrate came during the 90s, which is when the Soviet Union sort of collapsed, if you will, and the prime minister, or whoever he was, a president at the time, Michael Gorbachev, basically said, whoever wants to go can leave now. But it's easy to say, harder to do when you don't have any money and you don't have any connections and you don't know where to go. So my parents explained to me that, there's a big Jewish philanthropic organization in the United States that sponsors all the Jewish refugees like us. And we should be all set for a few months, and then my parents will get jobs, and somehow, we will survive. But that's what they explained to me, and they also explained to me why we're leaving. They said it's an opportunity. We have to take advantage of it because who knows? With our government today, they say you can go. Tomorrow, they might close borders. So when we have this opportunity, we should go in search of better life. Not so much for my parents, but they wanted it to be for me and my sister. Because of course, as younger people, the hope was that we would establish ourselves in the United States and become successful, etc. Also, my parents left Soviet Union because of anti-Semitism. That was the most important driving force. There was always anti-Semitism in that part of the world, Eastern Europe, specifically Ukraine, Russia, Belarus, whatever. Obviously now they're separate countries, but historically there's been a lot of anti-Semitism in those regions. And it also was the case during the Soviet times too, just on a different level. It was more like institutional, but still my parents did not want me to go through that. And we knew that America is a tolerable country. There are a lot of Jewish people living here freely, and that was one of the reasons to escape that religious persecution and, to have freedom and opportunity. So, as a child, I personally did not experience anti Semitism short of comments. Of course, you hear offensive comments. You being as Jewish, you could hear something insulting. But, it was occasional, and, I didn't really pay attention to it because, some people are mean, and that's just the way the life is. But personally, I didn't experience anything beyond that. But I heard stories from my parents because, like I said, they experienced anti-Semitism on an institutional level. Like there was a certain quota for Jewish people to get into colleges or universities. Like I don't remember exactly what the quota is, but there's only so many Jewish people, regardless of their ability and how good they're doing in school and what else, that can get in a particular university. And that existed for pretty much everywhere. Theaters, performance in theaters, some kind of a higher up positions like in factories, plants, or companies, which were all government run. there was always that quota, and for the Jewish people, it was really hard to get in. So my parents just did not want that to be something that I should experience, and I think that was one of the main reasons why they chose to immigrate to United States. But going back to the question, my mom and dad were telling me about that, and then some other incidents that happened to them personally. Somebody's calling them Jew this, Jew that in a public transportation, or when my father goes in a restaurant somewhere, sometimes he would hear all kinds of things like Jew this and Jew that. So I know that they've experienced it by far more than I did. I'm sure if I lived there longer, I would have experienced it much more. I just didn't have a chance because thankfully I left there at my age, at my young age. No, actually not bad. So that I remember. It wasn't bad because I know that people, for Jewish refugees who came here in the late 80s, they had to go through different countries to actually finally arrive to the United States. By the time I came to the States, it was a direct flight from Moscow to New York. So that part was easy. It's getting to that was hard because we had to go through countless interviews, both with American immigration authorities and, of course, with the Soviet ones. We had to go through all this medical testing and psychological testing and all kinds of checks, because they wanted to make sure that whoever, United States is accepting here as an immigrant is a person who has no infectious diseases and who is physically, mentally healthy, has no criminal background. So I do remember that part, like a lot of testing, a lot of interviewing, but the actual trip was easy. You just hopped on a plane in Moscow and 10 hours later, we were in New York. Yes, good question. So we had my mom's sister, my aunt, came, I want to say a year and a half before we did. So she's established herself in Springfield, Mass. With her family. So we were going to Springfield, Mass. Because that's where she was. So she already had some familiarity and she could help us like orient and get an apartment in this thing. So she made sure, I mean, we lived in a house together with her, but she made sure there's space for us. Also, local Jewish family services were of huge help to not just our family, but to all new immigrants from the Soviet Union. There were free English language classes that everyone in my family took advantage of. There were free services on how to get a job in the United States. They helped us with job finding or things like where do you go see a doctor and where do you do this and where do you do that. So in addition to having my aunt there, which was helpful, Jewish family services were of huge help to us in that sense. So I came in the summertime, so I had 2 months to sort of get adapted to the situation. So that's good. I didn't go to school right away. It was a few months, and then I started school in September. And I had to, so we lived in a neighborhood in Springfield that was pretty bad because we had no money. I think my father said that after we sold all our belongings in there and came here, I think he only had like $700 in his pocket or something like that. And then the Jewish Family Services provided very limited assistance. I think it was only 2 or 3 months. So both of my parents had to start working right away, to support our family. And because they worked the type of jobs like, my father was delivering pizza and Chinese food, and my mom was like a part-time nanny. Money were tight, so we had to live in a pretty bad neighborhood in Springfield, like a really rough neighborhood. So unfortunately, I had to go to school that was in that neighborhood. And that was tough. It was a shocking reality for me. It was a very bad school. Like, there was a metal detector when you come in, a lot of troubled kids. Probably most kids were troubled, and the kids who were actually good was the exception, not the rule. It was just a really scary experience, I think, for anybody, but especially somebody like me who was completely new to this country, didn't really speak the language well. It was a huge shock to my system. But I will admit I stuck around with my people because we kind of had to stick together because otherwise the bullying and everything else was so overwhelming. So I had our little group, and eventually I got used to that school, and I was there for 2 years, and I ended up graduating. But in the beginning, it was very tough, especially the cultural clashes. We're bullied a lot because we're so different. It took some time to really be able to stand your ground in that school and establish yourself, and you know make sure that nobody bothers you. It took a while. For my sister it was a little bit better. So my sister is, fortunately for her, is 9 years younger than me. So she was little. She was 6 when we came here. In Jewish Family Services were able to put her in a private school because some sponsor paid for it, because it was like a philanthropic organization. So they didn't have enough money to put me through private school, but they did have money to put my little sister through private school, at least the first several grades, because I think it was cheaper, maybe. So my sister ended up going to a private school the first, I want to say, 3-4 years that we were here. And so for her, I think it was easier. First of all, because she was younger, so she learned the language much quicker. It became, very fluent, no accent, none of that, because it's just easier for younger kids. And second, the school was much better. It was not dangerous to actually go to that school. So she got lucky in that sense. So my parents were really not around because they had to work so much, but I was already 15 and a half. So I would come home, take care of my sister, cook, clean, basically took care of my sister, and then make dinner for everyone. And then my parents would come home at night. My mom usually would come first. My dad sometimes worked all night long. I didn't spend too much time with my parents when we came here. They didn't have the time to dedicate to us, but I don't blame them for that. They had to worry about money and how to support us. So I was pretty much taking care of my little sister, and my mom and dad were working. Like I said, I felt bad for my mom because she had to be a nanny for another family while not being able to kind of be with her kids. But I understand her situation. Again, it was all done for the greater good because we had to survive. So I was pretty much on my own, I'd say, just taking care of my little sister, and seeing my parents on weekend. But it was fine. Like, I didn't feel anything was wrong with that setup because that's just how it was, and we've accepted it, and we lived that lifestyle for a while. So after I graduated high school, I went to local college, Springfield College. The only reason why I went to Springfield College, I couldn't afford to, go away somewhere. Like, of course, my dream, I would have loved to live on campus and experience that whole, college living on campus. We didn't have the money for it. So even though I got a ton of financial aid and scholarships, it wouldn't cover like room and board. So it just covered education. So Springfield College, I received the most, I'm pretty much, I think my loan at the end of 4 years of college or whatever I had to pay was only like $20,000. So because of that, because it was financially advantageous for me and I could continue working while I was in college, I ended up choosing Springfield College. So while I went to college, I also worked because, again, my parents couldn't support me. Like, I needed to have my own money. So both worked, went to college, stayed local, didn't know what to study. Of course, being a lawyer has been my dream because both my grandfather, maternal grandfather, and my mother were lawyers back there. So I almost felt like it was in my blood. But I thought my English was not good enough, even though I tried very hard to learn it. But I had all kinds of complexes about it. So I just started taking subjects in college that were easy for me and where I didn't have to use a lot of English language. So I took a lot of bio courses and math because that was all easy for me. And then eventually I ended up getting a job at a law office by chance, and working there, I really, really enjoyed it while still being in college. I think I was a junior in college when I got that. And then, people that worked with me in the office, they said to me, well, why not try law? And I said, me, lawyer, please, like my English is not good. And I don't know, I had so many complexes about it. But eventually I did it. So it all worked out. So for law school, I've been accepted. I was accepted to many schools, but again, I chose the ones that would offer me the most, scholarships and financial aid because I had to think practically. I didn't want to, take a huge amount of loans because, that's burdensome. And I didn't have any backup in my family. Like I knew my parents are not in a condition, they're not financially able to pay for my schooling. So I again picked what was practical, and at the time it was Suffolk University Law School, which is actually a very good school. It became, the rankings are much higher now. Plus, I always wanted to live in Boston, so I worked really hard before I went to law school, saved money so I can live for 1 year on the money that I saved, and I don't have to work because I knew first year of law school I wouldn't be able to work. So I ended up going to Boston, which was my dream, to live in Boston. I love the city. And I went to law school there, Suffolk University, yes. Yes, absolutely. So for me, being Jewish is not, and I know that might sound strange, but it's not, it doesn't really have much to do with religion. I know a lot of people in this country, they look at Jewish as being part of the Judaism religion. I grew up without religion, and it's not just me. In the Soviet Union, we have a very cosmopolitan society. There's a lot of different ethnicities, religious backgrounds, and so on and so forth, just like in the United States, actually. But during the communist time, people could not practice their religion. It was actually against the law. All the synagogues were closed down, churches, mosques. So people basically were agnostic, and religion was just not something relevant at all. We knew about it just because our grandparents would tell us, but nobody really practiced it. So when I came to the United States, I came to a realization that here being Jewish has a lot to do with religion, but here I am, I'm a very secular person, and religion is just not my thing. But I did try a little bit, to get familiarized with it, and I tried to, I'm trying to teach my children about it. But at the end of the day, for me, being Jewish, it's about my identity. It's my ethnicity, it's my culture, it's my background. It's something that I'm very, very proud of. So the way I incorporate my Jewishness here is, again, well, I try to celebrate some holidays because, again, that it all goes back to religion here in the United States. But I also try to teach my children about the customs and sort of the cultural aspect of it. Israel, which is also very important to me. I'm very pro-Israel. I've traveled to that beautiful country many times. So that's another part of my Jewishness, if you will, that I strongly associate, our birthright, that place, that beautiful, beautiful place. In terms of Soviet, yes, definitely still speak Russian. Russian is my primary language still, of course. I read and write in Russian. I taught my children how to read and write in Russian. I try to speak Russian to them as much as I can. It's challenging because my children are very Americanized and they don't want it. But maybe one day they'll embrace it. I don't know. Definitely cook a lot of Russian/Ukrainian/whatever, post-Soviet, I don't know how you want to call it, food. I have a lot of things in my home that are part of that culture, celebrate some of our holidays. So yes, I definitely practice that here in the United States. Oh, absolutely. US is my home. I mean, I've lived most of my life here. This is definitely my home. I've established my business here successfully. I have a lot of friends who are both American and also former Soviet immigrants. I have a good mix of both. Obviously I have my children here and all of their friends, and my mom and dad are in Springfield, Mass, so not too far. I definitely feel very lucky that I have that community here, but I do, for sure. I'm definitely well adopted. United States is my home. And I'm proud to call it my home. I really do think that the United States, whoever came up with the term that it's a land of opportunity, that's 100% correct words. It is a land of opportunity. To me, it's the best country in the world. And I have traveled a lot, okay, all over Europe, you name it. I've been to a lot of different places. And I'm so proud and happy to call United States my home. I know just like many other countries, this country is not perfect and we have our issues too. And, no country is perfect, I'm sure. But at the end of the day, I'm so thankful to the United States for everything it has given to me, the opportunity to be successful, to have such a great life here. I love American people for the most part. Most American people that I've met have been wonderful to me. And I just, to this day, and I've been here for 32 years, if not every day, then every other day, when I wake up in the morning, or sometimes it's at night, I don't know, it depends on the day. I sit there and I think, oh my God, how lucky I am to live here, to be here, to, the life that I have built, all thanks to this country. And of course, big thank you to my parents who made the sacrifice to bring me and my sister here. So, yeah. Oh gosh, definitely more wonderful stories, which is great, than bad, than bad hardship ones. I mean, like I said, the initial hardship here was really tough, getting adopted when you don't really speak English. I mean, I did speak English because I started learning it when my family knew that we're coming here, everybody started learning English. But still, you're a young teenager, your hormones are all over the place. It's already hard enough. And here you are in this completely new spot in this horrible school, which was just terrible. And all these kids who were like bullying, not just me, but, people like me. And it was a lot of bullying. It was tough. That was probably the toughest adjustment, feeling out of place. This is not the America that I thought I would come to. I didn't realize that there were bad parts of United States, but that unfortunately what I got to experience when I first came here. So that period of adaptation, I would say that first, second year, not having money, not having enough, getting, my outfits all came from Salvation Army. Kids were laughing at me, can't fit in, because it's like with the kids in high school, I don't have much in common because most of them come from broken families and they're like bad kids, whereas I'm coming from a really good educated family, but yet I'm on the same level, but I'm not like that. So that was just really, really tough for me in the beginning. College was also tough for me, but again, that goes back to the beginnings. The beginnings were tough because in college there are all these kids that wanted to party and they had all these money and they lived on campus, and I couldn't relate to it because I came to campus just to take my classes, and then I had to go and work. Like I didn't have time to party and do all this because I needed money to survive and save for future. So that was also, difficult in a sense, because it's like, oh God, like I can't relate to these people at all. But my life really improved once I moved to Boston and started going to law school. That's when I felt comfortable and I kind of felt like now I'm in my own element. So that was, good moments. I don't know. I had my children here, in this country. I've graduated law school. I have had a very successful career. I have my own law office that I built, from the ground up all by myself. I'm actively practicing law. I'm very happy with the way my career worked out. I built my life how I wanted to. So that I'm really, really happy about. But another dark moment, what's going on in our country now? I came to United States. Part of it was to avoid persecution, really, well, again, the whole anti-Semitism thing, right? Like I come back to it. I never felt it in the United States until probably, a year and a half, 2 years ago. Never felt it here. Again, maybe some comments here and there, but that stuff doesn't bother me. Like that happens to everyone. But, now what I'm seeing is the rise of anti-Semitism, and it bothers me. And it makes me worried because I came to this country in hopes of not dealing with that stuff. And now I'm seeing it coming back, and I am concerned about what's going on. And I'm concerned about the future of my children and how are they going to be. So yes, that part bothers me. Yeah, no, I'm seeing it. I've seen some of it in our city, sadly. Mostly I see it on TV. Things are happening in big cities, but that's how things start. They start in big cities and then eventually they reach small little provinces like, like our quiet little town. That's just usually the way things work. I don't. I'm sad that there's so much anti-Jewish propaganda. I think a lot of young people who are in colleges, they're not realizing what they're doing. They're equating their political views of something that Israel does, which is purely political. Israel is actually a secular country. I mean, I think a lot of people don't realize it. And they turn it into hatred against Jewish people. And I feel like this is all wrong, and it's starting to permeate our society. It starts with colleges and universities, and I'm just worried that it's going to escalate to the point where am I going to ever be in a situation where I'm going to fear for my safety and safety of my children. I don't feel this way today, but I'm worried that it may happen in the future. I want my kids to go to college without being concerned that somebody is going to yell, all Jews must die, or kill Jews, or that kind of stuff in their face, regardless of what politically is going on in our country. I don't think that ethnic groups or particular groups should be targeted. And I do feel that had this happened to maybe some other ethnic or religious groups in our country, I think the response would have been different. But it almost feels like when it happens to Jews, it's not, the response is not what I think it should be. But I also do want to say that even with all that, I still would say that so far, I still, no matter what, I still believe that the United States is the safest place for somebody like me at this point, even despite what's happening. Yes, I have. I went back twice. I was in Moscow and I was in St. Petersburg. However, I come from a place which is also now a separate country called Uzbekistan. It's kind of like in the Central Asian part of former Soviet Union. I really, really want to go back there. I know it's changed a lot since, 30 years, but I decided that I will go there when my kids are old enough to enjoy and understand it. So I'm just waiting for that right moment when my kids are older, so that I can take them and I can show them like, oh, this is, where you're from. And they're mature enough to actually understand and not just to be there and think, when can they go home already? Like, it has to be an appreciative experience. But yes, Moscow, St. Petersburg, I went to, things have changed a lot there since, it's more capitalist now. Of course, it's not as bad as it was. But I know that this is all a show. Big cities in a former Soviet Union are all looking good. But the minute you go 40, 50 minutes outside a big city, it's all, it's like a third world country, unfortunately. So I think the former republics of the Soviet Union, as Russia itself, still have a really long way to go to get anywhere near the level at which Western European, countries live, and so is the United States. They're still way far from that. I have no interest to ever come back there to live. Zero interest. This is my home, and I left that country, that place for a reason. But that said, I still have a huge appreciation for the culture. Russian culture, Uzbek culture, if you will, since I come from that specific region. I still have a lot of appreciation for the history. Would I go back again to Moscow and St. Petersburg? Yes, of course. It's great places to visit as a tourist, but not to live there. Okay. I think that a lot of Americans who, second, third, fourth, fifth generation, right? I mean, this is a country built on immigrants, right? A lot of Americans take this country for granted. Basic things, you don't have to be afraid to go outside because somebody, shooting is going to start, or bombing. You always have food in a grocery store when you go. You have abundance of restaurants. There's never a shortage of food. Basic things. Opportunity of good education. Anybody, even somebody like me who came from nothing, was, whole family, $700 in their pocket, and look at us now. This is a beautiful, wonderful country, despite issues that we now have, including anti-Semitism, which bothers me greatly, but still. I think people who live here, Americans, whether they're Americans like myself or naturalized Americans or Americans who have been here for generations and generations, really should have appreciation for this country. It's a beautiful country. I love America. I love United States. We should just have more respect for our country, more appreciation, not to take it for granted. And always remember that it is truly a land of opportunity. With right grit and determination, a little bit of brain, I think anybody could achieve anything here. So one of the things I love about United States, among many others, is how diverse the society is. I think it's great. Soviet Union, believe it or not, was a very diverse society. People came, it was a big cosmopolitan mix of people from all kinds of ethnic backgrounds, religious backgrounds, etc. And I will say, for the most part, we've always lived in peace. Here, I'm seeing similar. You have people from all kinds of different backgrounds, a lot of intermix of the cultures, various cultures, like a lot of cultural fusion here. I love that about the United States. And I actually think that's one of the big strengths of this country. So my whole thing is we gotta capitalize on that, right? Like, diversity is our asset. It's not a liability. It's an asset, in my opinion. So I just love that about the society. And that's another reason why it's so hurtful for me was the rise of anti-Semitism and all, because being Jewish, that's part of my diversity. That's kind of what I bring to the overall hodgepodge of all the cultures and everything here. So that's why the two are sort of related. My hope for the future is that this anti-Semitism, it's just a stage. Somehow it will blow over, and of course, ideally, it would be nice if all of us could just be happy and get along and respect and learn from each other's differences, as opposed to hate or worse. I believe it's Kennedy, President Kennedy, who said it's not about what your country can do for you, but what can you do for your country? I think more people should think like that. What can you give back to the community? How can you make our country even better? It's not all about you, and what you can get. What can you do? So that's, I think, what I'm trying to say. It's a great country, and as its citizens, we should do our best to, bring our contribution as well to make it even better.